Good midday to you. Shalom. This is the midday moment for the disciple life. We talk about everything with these segments. Want to take a moment to talk a little bit more about the health situation with Rudy Giuliani. And as with any politician, political public figure, this is not an official endorsement of everything about him. What was recently hospitalized and apparently was in critical condition. Now last I knew, he's rated as critical but stable, and apparently is some better. So it is looking like recovery is a possibility. So of course we keep praying for him. But with this, I think about what we have in a verse like Proverbs 24, verse 17, where we're told to not rejoice when our enemy falls, and to not let your heart be glad when he stumbles. Now, I don't consider Rudy Giuliani to be an enemy, that's for sure. He and I would see eye to eye on many things, actually. My beliefs would lead many to classify me as conservative. Now, as a follower of the Christ, I actually don't fit completely nicely, neatly into these modern political categories, but I probably would be more in line with him than many others. But one of the things I saw, and the reason I brought up that verse about, once again, not rejoicing when your enemy falls and not letting your heart be glad when he stumbles, is I went on. Now, of course, X is one of the main places you're going to see this stuff, but you see it on the other anti-social media outlets too. I went on X and was just curious, and it was there. And there is this thing right now where people are wishing just the worst things on people. And, he's in the hospital. And so, like, this is something to rejoice in, and to, you know, to just be really happy that somebody you don't like, that something bad is happening to him. Now, sadly, this is one of the things we have kind of learned to expect from many on the left. Now, not all, not all. I recall hearing Rob Reiner's words at the tragic death of Charlie Kirk, and just him talking about how horrible that was. And so, not all on the left, not all that are liberal, which that's kind of a relative term, but on the left or progressive, not all are like that. But there are enough where, sadly, we've kind of come to expect it. But here's the thing: the hate goes both ways. It really is these days. I saw one of the posts that basically kind of said, good, now he can't hurt people anymore, or something like that. That's not exact paraphrase. I think I did screenshot it, so I'll try to share it when I repost the video. But then they basically said, and this might be a slight paraphrase, so keep that in mind if I do put up the screenshot, that they were just following Trump's example. And, guys, conservatives need to be careful. The fighting fire with fire. Well, actually, oftentimes you don't do that. That's just, fighting fire with fire. That's where they like burn away the brush to get out of the way, so there's nothing for the fire to burn through and to contain a forest fire and this sort of thing. And you did see after they did what they did to Charlie, and I say they because there's an ideology, I do think, prompted that young man to do what he allegedly has done, and where all the evidence is pointing, despite what Candace Owens and others might be suggesting, all the evidence is pointing to that this young man is guilty. There's an ideology behind that. But when this happened, when he did this, and you had some conservatives saying, well, y'all killed Charlie, you're not going to like who comes next. In other words, Charlie, he did have a way of approaching things where he's trying to engage people, and there was a lot of, there was a lot of Christian thought and biblical guidance to the way he approached things. And they're basically saying, you're not going to get that now. It's like, He was the good guy, so we're not going to be the good guys anymore. Okay, well then you just have two sets of bad guys, right? You just have two sets of bad guys and no good guys left. This evil for evil. We are not to answer evil with evil. When conservatives are defending things our president has said, now, when I say this is not to put down everything he's done. This is not to say he's just a horrible president or something. I agree with many things that he's done. I agree with many of the positions that he takes. I am grateful for much of what he has done. I am grateful that Roe v. Wade it was struck down, and that is in part because of the justices that he put forward to be put in place in the Supreme Court. So there are things he's done. Totally agree with it. Okay, but to defend every word, I recently saw a conservative that you have some protester that apparently got blinded protesting ICE, and you can have two seemingly contradictory things that aren't actually contradictions. Contradictions are when two things can't be true at the same time and in the same way. You can have the fact that the young man wouldn't have had that happen if he hadn't been protesting, if he hadn't had such an extreme radical position. But it doesn't mean it's okay to glory in what happened to him. And I saw somebody make a post saying, you were blind before you were blinded. And it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? If we're going to claim to be the good guys, here's the thing about being the good guys. You do have to act like the good guy. In the movie, when you have the bad guy getting ready to fall and the good guy's trying to help the bad guy up, sort of thing. So why do you do that? Because he's the good guy. Because he is in the light. Those that are in the light live accordingly. Those that are in the darkness live accordingly. When we start letting in the darkness, we're in darkness. So that with the hate back and forth, and with some conservatives now seeming to think that they should adopt the tactics of the radical leftists, and I'm not saying all conservatives, and many conservatives would be against that sort of thing, but particularly if somebody claims to be a Christian, to justify everything our president says, to justify everything a conservative says and does, that is not for us to do. That is opposed to what we should be. Abstain from every form of evil, and do not excuse darkness because they happen to stand for light. These are flawed men. These are not prophets of God. These are not apostles. Even with them, not everything was to be supported, right? When you read scripture and you see the flaws of the prophets, you see the flaws of the apostles. So let's be careful and let's stop with this hate versus hate thing that is going on. Yes, Reach, and once again, we're glad that Rudy Giuliani it seems to be recovering. Continuing prayers with him. On the left, it could be we see more of this than we do on the right, but there's definitely some on the right. And so let's not just excuse it and act like it's not happening, because it is. It is. So let's make sure that if we're going to claim to be in the light, let's live like it and act like it. You have a good rest of the day, Lord willing. We'll be posting the Tuesday tips here pretty soon. And shalom.